Hello, my name is Collie Brown. Welcome to Africa Business Channel TV. Today, we're going to be taking a look at why African banks are stifling growth in Africa. If you wanted to borrow money from a bank and you're a business, you walk into the bank and you say, I want to borrow $100,000. One of the first questions you'll get is, first of all, do you have an account with us? The presumption is if you don't have an account, you can't get a loan. So that's the first problem. The second one is they're going to ask you, what is your collateral? What are you going to be using as collateral? And you ask, okay, so what are the kinds of collateral you take? And you're going to almost always get the same answer. And that is, you're going to get land or building, fixed asset. Now, land and building are very good, collateral. But if you think about it, land and building has been a collateral for over 100 years in banking. And the problem is that modern banking and modern business have lots more things that are collateral. And for the bank, most banks don't recognize those collaterals. So if you don't have those two specific collaterals, you're in trouble. So the money you're going to need, and the money might be simply to buy a piece of machinery, improve your process, create more products, sell more things, be more efficient. Whatever the reason you're asking for the money, you're unlikely to get it if you don't have one of those two collaterals. The ability of banks to be able to evaluate different forms of collateral is a massive problem. For example, in the United States, if you wanted to borrow money, there are hundreds of different collaterals that you could use. If you have an exclusive trade agreement, the banks are in a position to evaluate it. Not so in Africa. In other words, if you have an agreement that says you are the sole company that can distribute something, the banks are not in a position to understand what that means and put a monetary value to it. And so as a result, you do not get the loan. The other thing that the bank is not going to do is most banks don't have an investment arm where there are people with the expertise in terms of business financing. Again, they go back to the traditional forms of financing. Suppose you are a business and you have $1 million worth of products sitting on your floor already manufactured, and you wanted to borrow $500,000. Do you think you could walk into the average African bank and say, look, I want $1 million to borrow or $500,000 to borrow. I've got $1 million worth of products finished on my floor. You can use that as a collateral. No, because they have no way to evaluate it. And in their minds, it doesn't exist. If they can't evaluate it, or if they can't put a specific value on it, they're not going to give it a loan. You start to see a problem here, that the creative financing that businesses need, African banks don't have it. One of the things that separate African banks from Western banks, particularly American banks, is the range of products that American and these other foreign banks have. And by the way, also the many types of banks. There's investment banks, and then there's a traditional savings bank, but many of those traditional savings banks have their own investment arms. So they don't have that variety in Africa. And again, that comes back to not, for businesses having a challenge getting the financing they need to grow their business. So in Western banks, you go into their investment arm and you'll see a bunch of young 20-odd age group people. And what are their jobs? Their job is to come up with products, investment products, ways of creating collateral that they can then pitch to the bank, and then the bank can then use some of those as products that a business can take advantage of. In Africa, you'd be lucky if you find, so a bank with a reasonable investment arm. And because of that, again, African businesses don't get the financing that they need. The other big challenge with African banks is they tend to be small. And when I say small, I mean they tend to be in one country. And as a result, their sole exposure is within that country. And foreign banks tend to be bigger, tend to be much more capitalized. And so they have enough money, or more money, I should say, to be able to lend to businesses. In America and in the West, you have a lot more types of banks, as I mentioned before, and each of those have different ways of providing financing to business. In Africa, you don't have many of those types of institutions. You just have the traditional bank. The same bank that serves mom and pop is the same banks that serves the business. And if you look at many of these banks, what are the types of accounts they have? Savings, checking, which is the traditional, and they do that for businesses. They have no brokerage account. They don't have any kind of advanced investment accounts, none of those things. So their product offering is extremely, extremely, extremely small. All right, so we know that they are stifling businesses, right? We know because the financing that businesses need is challenging to get, because the banks don't understand the way the businesses do business. In addition to that, startup capital is a big challenge for many wannabe business people. Many of these financial institutions, these banks, don't have a way or have the personnel with the necessary knowledge and skill to be able to evaluate a business plan to see if a business plan makes sense. And again, that leads to less loans being made. In other words, when you look at the profile of a typical African loan, it is extremely conservative. And that conservative is at the point where it's choking Africa's ability to grow. So how do we change this thing? First and foremost, banks have to recognize that they're behind the curve. Their Western counterparts will run rings around them. And it's not because, the amount of money they have. It's the knowledge and the expertise that they have with the financing that the banks have, right? Banks make money when you put your deposits in and they turn around and lend that out to borrowers and charge an interest. That's how banks make money. So the size of the banks are not growing because they're not making the types of loans or the quantity of loans so that they can become bigger and be able to handle bigger type loans. So if you wanted, for example, to borrow $5 million US, you'd probably have to go to 4 banks. And if one bank is giving you a nightmare, well, how much more 4 banks? And each bank would probably take $1.25 million. That's probably the best way you're going to be able to get that. But the odds are you won't even get that loan because the 4 bankers or 5 bankers won't agree. So again, the banks are stifling growth. At this point, if you have not liked or subscribed to this video, we ask that you do so. And if you have subscribed, please hit the notification bell so that you can be notified when new releases are done. So the small businesses, and most African businesses are small, less than 5 employees, have very little ways to grow their business if they're looking to capital. So how do these businesses get their capital? Most of them get it from family members, from friends, through the informal system. That is how. But that is not a proper way to finance businesses. Hence, most African businesses remain small and they don't have the capital needed to buy the equipment that they need to grow. And if Africa is to grow and to become a force to be reckoned with, it is going to need a proper financial system. That means that banks and other financial institutions are going to have to revolutionarily change the way they do business. They're going to have to come up with more products. They're going to have to realize that they are an impediment to African business growth. It can be done. It's not a difficult thing to do. It's just the realization from bankers that the product offerings that they have are over 100 years old, and they need to create new and innovative financial products that businesses can take advantage of and grow their business and provide employment for the African youth. At this point, African banking and African finance is a significant impediment to the growth in African businesses. And so for all the challenges that I've talked about, the fact that they're small, they're local, the fact that one of the biggest ways they make money, they're not really utilizing it to its maximum. That is, make loans and take the margins as profit. The less loans you make, the less profit you make. That's just the way it works, right? So the fact that they're not doing all of that is a big driving force in why African businesses. So if you're a banker in Africa, take a look at your product line and ask yourself this question. Am I doing all I can with the product line I have for African businesses, large or small? Do I have all the products that I need to properly service a business person who walks in and needs a loan? Do I have the expertise in-house to be able to understand and evaluate the various types of collateral instruments that that person could walk in with? Or am I only relying on something that is over 100 plus years old, and that is land and buildings? And the next question is, do I have a team that is being innovative in terms of the different services that businesses need? Can we provide the services that they need, the banking services? If the answer to those questions are no, or maybe, then you know you have some work to do to turn around your business and to make it an attractive place for businesses to come to get the financing they need and to grow. So, African banks, African financial institutions, you have your work cut out for you. You have some homework. And Africa is counting on you to make sure that you have the products and services that African businesses need so they can get the financing they need to grow their businesses and provide employment for the millions of young Africans that need a job. Thank you for watching. If you haven't liked, share, or subscribed, please do. If you have subscribed, again, click the notification bell so you are notified when new videos are released.